Welcome to the Conscious Investor. Let's get started. I am absolutely excited. I'm breaking tradition. I usually record once a month, but I was sick and then I was traveling. And so we're finally recording this a podcast episode. John, thank you for your resiliency and thank you for coming on the Conscious Investor.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, Julie.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a, roller coaster ride to make this happen, but I'm really excited. The conversation that we're about ready to have is going to really be foundational for a lot of you newer investors, and maybe not so much on the mechanic side, but I'm hearing a lot of chatter out there from newer investors that are saying, hey, I've got to have this social media presence. I have to have this platform. I can't be successful unless I do X, Y, Z. And they put all these burdens on themselves. And so John and I are going to we're going to unpack that. We're going to unpack all sorts of things as we go through this episode. But that I think is going to be one of the biggest takeaways for a lot of people, because kind of like I have a podcast episode with Josh Rhodes on how to launch a podcast. And we did a little comparison, like this will be maybe even similar to that because John's kicking butt.
Well, I'm trying to anyways.
Yeah, exactly. So, hey, I don't do big introductions on the show, but maybe if you could just give people a little snapshot of like who you are and what you're up to.
Sure. So high level, when people ask, who you are and what do you do, I introduce myself as an investor, an educator, and a realtor. So I've been, investing in some way, shape, or form since 2014, kind of when I started my investment journey. In 2020, I started my website and blog to kind of share with others what I've learned in my investing journey. And then just this year in November 2021, decided, what the hell, let's launch a podcast when I have a 2-month-old running around the house, or crying in the house, I should say. So just kind of, one thing built on top of the other. Kind of had my aha moment years ago of, I don't want to be working 40, 50, 60 hours a week at a W-2 job, and even kind of look at it of, what if I don't make it to 65 on the quote unquote retirement? Both my parents passed away in their 50s. So then I just kind of took a step back of, well, there's got to be a way to earn money, not from working, that I can earn money now and in retirement, not just defer everything to a later date.
I love that. Can I earn money while I sleep?
Yes.
Right.
Or doing other activities. So.
Right. Exactly. And that's really interesting because that concept of retirement or, just maturing in life and, finding those golden years. My dad passed away, I consider young as well, not as young as your parents, but it's like you don't understand how much time you have. And I think, tell me if this resonates with you. I want to use the time I have to do something really great. And I want to enjoy my family while I'm healthy and alive. Exactly. I don't want to have to wait until some later date. Okay, well, now you cross this line. I don't know. What do you think of that?
No, I definitely agree with that. I mean, none of us know, how much life we have left, so to speak, whether it's tomorrow or, hopefully many, many years from now. Myself with my previous job, I was in office equipment sales, and I, pretty much burned myself out. There was times I left at 6 a.m, got back at 6 p.m. I was on the road anywhere from 100 to 250 miles a day. And then as soon as I got home, then, okay, whip out the laptop for another 2-3 hours doing emails and proposals. Very thankful I don't have that life anymore. I think my wife's even more thankful I don't have that life anymore.
How did you get out of that life? Because, oh goodness, you're just living to work.
Yep. It was kind of a multi-step process. So in my career, I was, shall we say, young and stupid. I would chase every deal out there. And a friend and mentor that I worked with, I want to say this was back in 2013, 2014, somewhere in there. He gave me a really good graph of, every customer and prospect you can break down into 4 categories. So you have your high margin, low maintenance customers. Those are basically your cash cows. You can talk about the 80-20 rule and where most of your business comes from. Obviously, those are your cash cows. Those are the ones you want to concentrate on. And then you got 2 other categories, the high margin, high maintenance. Okay, you're going to earn your money's worth. And then the low margin, low maintenance, like, okay, don't make a lot of money on them. They don't order a lot, but they don't take up much of your time. But then there's the one category, the high maintenance, low margin. And he just said, fire them. Do not go after them. Let your competitors go after them. And I think that was a big wake up call for me where, okay, instead of chasing every deal out there and working the 50, 60 hours a week I was, just take a step back, concentrate on the primary customers. Then I was able to still earn the same amount of money, yet not working as many hours. So that kind of helped even free up my time of, okay, listening to podcasts, reading other activities to learn about investing and kind of start my own passive income journey. From there, then it was just more of a stacking where my tagline is financial freedom, one bill at a time, where I would break down each recurring monthly bill and basically match up a revenue stream to cover it. So, and then just been building that ever since then. So, I mean, one example, we have a rental in Memphis, Tennessee, that net cash flow pays for our monthly natural gas bill and 2 of our life insurance policies every month. So, okay, we got an income stream that takes care of 3 bills. Okay, go on to the next one, and just been kind of building it ever since then.
That is such a really unique approach, because I haven't heard too many people discuss this, and certainly not on The Conscious Investor, but that's a very interesting way of being very intentional about what is the direct relationship between my investments and my livelihood. And almost like that, the Dave Ramsey, it's so funny because I was just speaking with someone yesterday, an investor, discussing Dave Ramsey and how it actually kind of derailed them for a little bit on their investment journey, because they're like, well, we're like great for some things, but not great for, that concept though. It has a similar feel to it of, okay, I'm going to invest here and that's going to tackle this, and just pairing them up. Genius.
Well, and I look at it too. I mean, I think, I don't want to say the financial gurus, but a lot of programs out there, they seem to like, what's your monthly number? And I've heard everything from $5,000 to $15,000 a month. $10,000 seems to be the, most common one. And I think just for a lot of people, they look at that, it's like, oh, that just seems so insurmountable. I mean, even back in my sales job, I wasn't even pulling in $10,000 a month. So it's like, well, if I can't do that working a W-2 job, how the hell am I going to do that with investing? But if you just kind of take it a step back of like, okay, I mean, usually for everyone's monthly bills, their Netflix subscription, it seems like everyone has that nowadays. Okay, let's just start with here's, $15 or whatever your monthly plan is. Can we find an investment that brings in $15 a month passively, and then just kind of build up from there? So, okay, maybe $10,000 a month is pretty, intimidating, but well, $15 a month, I think we can start with that.
That's awesome. Okay, so what were some of the first investments that you started with?
The first one I did, unfortunately, isn't around anymore, is a peer-to-peer lending site called Lending Club. I got invested in that, where basically, say you need to borrow money for whatever, a car, a home improvement project, whatever, you go on the platform as a borrower saying, I need whatever, $10,000, I want a 5-year loan, etc. And then it would basically pool, or the program would pool investor money. You could put in anywhere from $25 and up and pool that money together. So the borrower would pay Lending Club would disperse the proceeds appropriately to the investors. So that kind of built up. That was my first one. And then started learning.
Okay, let's just go into, how did you find that? Because that is another question people have, is how do I even learn about these things? I want to find these smaller opportunities because I don't have 50 grand to put into an apartment syndication. But I could do 15, 25 bucks, right?
I honestly don't even remember how I first came out about it. Like I said, they discontinued the platform about a year ago, year and a half ago. I can't remember now, but just kind of started going down the rabbit hole of, researching podcasts and, Google searches and right, wrong, or indifferent, the algorithms that say, oh, you Google this might be of an interest, or Amazon, oh, you bought this book. Here are 5 other books that other people like you bought. And, just kind of go down the rabbit hole of that. And then I even just took it one step farther where I had myself tried a lot of platforms. Some worked well, some were absolute garbage. And on my website, I even have like an investment opportunities page where it line items everything from, start engine to turnkey rental companies that I've worked with that, I don't want to say that I vetted them per se, but it's like, hey, I actually have firsthand experience. These have worked well for me versus someone else starting from scratch like I did, maybe offer a few shortcuts of, don't mess with Lending Club. They don't offer it anymore, but hey, there's these other platforms that have worked out very well.
That's amazing. And that is such a service. I've really contemplated adding something like that to my site as well for the different service providers that I've utilized for infinite banking and rolling over into self-directed funds, because you really have to vet those. You have to vet the people that you are working with and the product and the quality of what are you actually offering me.
Right. Yeah. And I guess myself personally, I wanted to, if I was, making recommendations or showcasing investments that worked well, I didn't want to pull a Susie Ortman where a lot of people don't know this, but she advertises, oh, invest in these mutual funds and invest here, invest in the stock market. And she was asked point blank in an interview, and she admitted, oh, I don't invest in any of that. I invest in 0 coupon bonds from all the money I make from my books and television shows. So I kind of was like, okay, so you're basically saying, do as I say, not as I do, where I didn't want to do that. And okay, well, yes, I have a property with Mid-South Home Buyers. Mid-South Home Buyers is on my list. I have 2 properties with Spartan Invest. Spartan Invest is on my list, and so forth. So I didn't want to come across as hypocritical of, well, Julie, I've heard this is a great program to invest in, but, I wouldn't touch it and I don't do anything with it.
Yeah. That is the heartbeat behind why I went through my investment journey the way I did, because I said, I want my passive investors I want to know what they feel. I want to invest passively first. I want to go down the rabbit hole of infinite banking. I want to go down the rabbit hole of rolling over funds. I want to go down, every little step that, many passive investors, experience. If you've experienced it yourself and you've vetted some people and you say, hey, these are 3 people that I would suggest that you look into. I always like to give 3. I mean, 3 Keys investments. Come on.
Oh, sure.
Be 3,
there you
right?
go.
Right. No, but you never know who is even going to click as human beings, always like having a fit with the person. You just never know.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you've been successful. You've cultivated and developed, this investment. And I love the system that you have. And I want to ask you that question that many people have been asking me, because people will say, oh, Julie, you've created this platform. And I say, you don't have to do that, because a lot of people want to get out there and launch their podcast and they want to create this presence in order to invest. And it's like, no. So what are your thoughts on that?
I definitely don't think you need to do that. I mean, like I said, I started my investing journey mostly through education, starting in late 2014. And, it wasn't until 6 years later that I did my website. And then, 7 years later that I launched my podcast. So I, definitely don't think you need those. I would say it's maybe beneficial and helpful. I've networked with a lot of people like yourself with my podcast and my website as well, but I don't think you need a presence. I think the biggest thing it just comes down to is, I tend to be a little introverted, so maybe even step outside your comfort zone and network more, talk to more people. And for most people, I think that's probably the best way to get started in investing, where, depending on how down the rabbit hole you want to go with this, a lot of the advertised investments people see, unfortunately, are for 506c or accredited investors, where, unless you have a net worth of $1 million, less the value of your primary residence, or $200,000-$300,000 a year in income for the last 2 years, a lot of people, including myself, don't meet that threshold. But then, kind of a catch-22 with 506b, they can accept non-accredited investors, but the SEC says, well, you can accept accredited or unaccredited investors, but you can't advertise. Well, if I can't advertise, how do I get investors to my platform? It's just kind of this catch-22. And, there it comes just from the networking piece and, reaching out to other people, building a relationship. And then, oh, by the way, yes, I run this syndication platform, or yeah, my friend in California, he's doing this, and just, kind of grows from there, where, okay, you can't advertise, but you can, learn about it from word of mouth and other investors.
That's such the shackles,
Yeah.
we have some of our, high net worth people that are in the golden handcuffs, but then all of these sophisticated investors who fall under that, we're non-accredited, but we're sophisticated investors. We have this other, I don't know what color, I don't know what kind of handcuffs we can, call those, because they're not golden, they're like tarnished silver. Like I can't even handcuffs. I can't advertise. I can't do this. And I've spoken about this before in the podcast, because even over on even if, using our social media presence, we're not allowed to say, hey, you should invest with me. We can't lend ourselves in all, we have to be very guarded about our words so that we don't get slapped. And there are so many regulations about it.
Yeah.
So well, maybe you have some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. And I don't know. I know the SEC is quote unquote supposed to protect you, but I think it's almost laughable. I mean, I myself I've come across the 506c investment that I can't remember how I heard about them, but their minimum investment was $1,000. And I'm like, oh, I can invest in that, 20, 40, 50 times over in my self-directed retirement account. And then they're like, oh, well, you have to be accredited. I'm like, you have to be an accredited investor to invest $1,000. That just seems ridiculous. But okay, they want to advertise. I understand they're handcuffed by the SEC as well. Of we want to advertise, get our name out there, so and have less paperwork when you have a 506c platform. But then the other side, I did get wind of a platform. It was through a turnkey provider I was working with in Kansas City, Missouri. He's like, oh yeah, there's a platform I know of. You don't have to be accredited. Okay, sounds good. What's the minimum investment? Oh, $200,000. And I'm thinking, well, that's more than my entire retirement account. And that's even if it was sitting in cash right now. So, there you go, from a range of $1,000 to $200,000. And depending on if you can invest in it, is all determined by some arbitrary definition by the SEC, which I think is ridiculous.
It makes it so challenging, so to be, fully transparent, I invested in an alternative asset earlier this year in early 2020. And I didn't know anything about this. I got into e-commerce.
Okay.
Good golly. Fill in a lot of words there, because, it seemed as if, and if you've been tracking with the podcast, awesome listeners, you've heard me speak about this in different ways throughout the year. And it goes from like, this is going to be interesting and fun, to this is a total train wreck, to acceptance of, I will never, ever invest in something I don't understand. Yeah. And through that, through that process, I'm doing a lot of mental filtering right now. Sure. but through that process, it really helped me understand a little bit better, maybe develop some level of sensitivity to the SEC's sophisticated guidelines for investors, because, I wasn't taken advantage of, but I definitely did not understand it. Ultimately the investment was not what it was presented to be. Sure. And so, it's a lot of, I'm almost, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel of actually being done with it, but it's been one of those things that's been, on the peripheral or smack up in my face all year long, costing me time, money, and energy. So in that regard, I can sympathize a bit with the SEC saying we don't
Mhm.
want people to get into these investments that they don't understand.
Yeah.
But real estate is not complicated. And that's what I
Well,
love about it. It's tried, it's true, and it really doesn't take a lot of learning to understand the mechanics.
yeah. Well, and I even kind of look at maybe the hypocrisy with the SEC, of okay, I just gave an example of there's a syndication 506C minimum investment $1,000. I
Thousand.
think a lot of your listeners probably could say, well, I either have that in cash or hey, I have that in my self-directed retirement account. That's not a
Yep.
problem. But then go back to previous January when you had all the Reddit posts of bumping up GameStop stock
Right.
and AMC and was it Dogecoin and all these others. I'm like, okay, so you can have a non-sophisticated investor take out a $50,000 loan or HELOC, throw it all in AMC, it collapses by 80%. They still have the loan to pay. That's fine in the SEC's eyes.
This is so
But to
true.
put $1,000 in your retirement account in a vetted 506C, oh no, we can't do that. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. But I have a hunch that there's a lot of Wall Street money behind that to write the rules,
This,
regulations.
wow, we could go down a rabbit hole because then we could throw in all the lawsuits with Ripple and
Yeah,
how that's
and
yeah,
Robin
there
Hood
is
and everything. Yep.
right. Yeah, there are a lot of discrepancies. I agree with you on that. So we don't have to have a platform in order to invest and to start our investment journey.
Mm.
It does help us. And I think it supports us as we grow in our investment journey because now we're ready to invite more people into our offerings. And we need to invite people if we're going to scale up. So
Right.
you're at that point where you're scaling up. What is your goal as we head into a new year?
As we go into a new year, I don't know if there's anything particular for 2022. I'm still, the largest property that I own is a fourplex. The last one I purchased was a duplex. Maybe I'll go down the syndication route sometime, but kind of back to all that SEC BS, in my opinion. I just don't want to deal with it. Still kind of working, building blocks, knocking off, recurring bill by another investment stream. My end goal is by 2030 that all our bills are paid for by passive income, and both my wife and I don't have to work. We may if we want to, but it's not because we have to, that we need the income. And being a new father as well, I kind of look ahead of okay, my son will be 8-9 years old, probably getting into more activities. It'd be nice to be available for him, whether it's I don't know, a baseball game or concert or whatever the case may be, versus, oh, sorry, I have a showing I need to go do or have to work late tonight, or whatever the case may be. And I think for a lot of people, it's I think just the time freedom that everyone's wanting, not so much maybe the financial freedom.
Thank you for saying that. I think there's so much to be said on that concept of time freedom and
Mhm.
flexibility and being able to pivot. My husband and I, we're both in real estate in different capacities, and he's on the residential world.
Oh, sure.
He's not, I always joke that I fired him because I went down the commercial path, and it's a different dialect of real estate and
Mhm.
syndications and such. And I just thought, that's fine. You can no harm, no foul. Like
Yeah.
because he's really good at what he does, and it blesses people. It's amazing. But it's so nice to be able to go and, hey, you want to just drop the kids off together? Or
Yeah.
maybe we're having a conversation in the afternoon and the kids are going to be done with school. You want to just drive and pick them up together. And the
Sure.
flexibility to be able to just pivot with our schedules and,
Mhm.
and, go and, gather the kids together. I think it's pretty cool because
Right.
it's not something that can happen all the time. And we know that as our kids get older, particularly when they're in adulthood, they'll probably realize how rare that is.
Mhm.
Wait,
Exactly.
your parents picked you up?
Yeah. They're able to go to all the games. They're able to go to all the concerts. They didn't
Yeah.
have to work during the day. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, and going to my son's football games this last fall, his first time playing football in seventh grade, we were able to do that. Those away games, they're actually far for us because we're in a rural location.
Sure.
And
Yep.
so, yeah, No problem. It's at a weird time of the day. You're having a football game at a, 1:30
Yeah.
on a Tuesday afternoon. No problem. We're there.
Takes 3 hours to drive there. Sure. We'll leave at 11:30.
Exactly. Exactly. The day is yours. We got it
Yeah.
scheduled. Kudos to you. It's a fantastic priority. And even if kids don't understand it in the moment, I
Mhm.
believe they get it later on in life for sure.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that is kind of a rarity. I think we've been, I don't know, programmed from day one. I think from K through 12 school is you go to school, get good grades, take out student loans, go to college, get a degree, get a great job with great benefits, work 40 hours a week until you're 65, and then you retire into this utopian lifestyle of your golden years. And I just don't think that's really worked for a lot of people. And I think there's other avenues and more to life than working 40, 50, 60 hours a week at a W-2 job that 1/3 of it at least is going to be taxed away.
Oh my goodness. Or more now that we've printed a ton of money.
Well, that's another discussion.
Right. I recorded an episode recently with, and it'll air before this. So if you haven't heard it already, go back. It's with
Okay.
Dennis Meralda from the Building Men podcast. Make sure you go back and listen to that if you're listening right now, and you haven't heard it, because we touch on this. We were both in education, and we talk about it's kind of like this factory to create, factory workers.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, stepping outside of that box and outside of that zone is huge.
Exactly.
Huge. There's far more to life.
Yeah. Well, and there's, I don't know, what was it, a Jim Rohn quote of formal education will make you a living, self-education will make you wealthy, or something like that. And I'm all for education. I just don't think the K-12 platform is necessarily the right way. I think it's antiquated. It's from the agrarian and industrial age. I mean, heck, the whole reason we have summers off still in high school is because, oh, well, everyone used to live on a farm and they needed the time off in the summer to help with crops and the livestock. Well, I think it's under 10% of families live on a farm now, but we still have the 9-month K through 12 schedule. So go figure.
Yeah, super, super interesting. Let's go into, I don't want to run out of time. I want to make sure we touch base on your podcast. It's a recent addition to the podcast family. And tell us, what are you doing with your podcasts? What's it about? What are your goals?
So I guess I would say it's a repository of all the education and platforms and nuggets I've picked up along the way. Mine podcast is labeled the Wealth and Freedom Nexus podcast. That's also the name of my website. And I just kind of came up with the idea, kind of back to the financial freedom, is I know people that are wealthy, but the second they stop working, they have no income. So they're not really free. And I kind of think back to when we're kids and we have summers off and weekends and we're off school at 3, and we have a lot of freedom or time freedom, but I don't think any of us were wealthy. And I think the nexus or the connecting point of that to get wealth and freedom is passive income. So that's kind of what my, criteria or main point or focal point that I wanted to bring. So I've started bringing on guests for the whole life policies, infinite banking. I've had a couple of turnkey operators so far. 2022 we'll be bringing in some more for like international speakers and asset protection, and kind of just multifaceted with all the topics that I've learned, everything from cryptocurrency to passive investment, and just kind of wanted to have a long runway for the podcast versus, I'm going to have a podcast just on residential real estate or just on cryptocurrency or something along that line. I think there's just a lot more to it that I'd like to educate others on that, I found helpful in my journey.
That's awesome. While it's important to be niched down in whatever it is that we're doing, you are niched down because it's all on passive income streams. Right. So,
well, and I've come across too many podcasts where they're focused on just one thing, and you can kind of tell they start to get burned out. They're like, oh, we're going to replay this episode from 2 years ago, which means, okay, I couldn't think of a topic for this week, so I'm going to, do a rerun or bring on a guest for the 12th time that I've had on before. And I just think having more of a multifaceted, passive income, asset protection, multiple streams of income, just allowed for more topics that others might get involved in. And while they've worked well for me, maybe someone wants to do just syndications. Maybe someone wants to do just single family homes. I got one friend that's made a killing in cryptocurrency, even though I have a very small holding in that. So I think it's just the education piece, then everyone can find their own path to passive income, what works well for them, and kind of create the life that they want.
It's almost like the bigger pockets world.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I mean, bigger pockets, it's all real estate, but there's so many things beneath the umbrella of real estate. Your passive investing, which includes so many different streams.
Or down the wholesaling or fix and flipping or private lending or lease to own or contract for deeds, or, I mean, all centered around real estate, but various topics. So
that is fantastic. You mentioned earlier self-education. I think you're an avid reader and self-educating. And in passing, I'll throw this out there. I was dropping my daughter off at school this morning, and she said, "Mom, if you could go back to college and learn more, would you go do that, or would you keep doing what you're doing?" Like,
wow.
I said, oh, that's, and she's in this whole would you rather type moment in life, I think. And so I said, no, I can educate myself. The purpose of school, like, you learn how to learn. Like, that's what you do. I said, I don't have to go to college to learn. She's like, so you don't need the grades to push you. You're just motivated on your own. I'm like, yeah, it's called, I have a business, sweetie pie. My business to thrive and be successful. But that concept of continually learning. So what are some of maybe the books or some of the avenues that you digest often to, continually learn?
Sure. Well, probably the big thing, two big things I would say, just really kind of been going down the rabbit hole of like the Federal Reserve and the banking system. I'm currently on 3 books right now. On my recommended reading list on my website, there's a book, Creature from Jekyll Island. Very long read, I will warn everyone, but it is very in depth of the Federal Reserve, how the finance, banking industry or cartel, if you will, work. But then also
I like that you called it that. By the way, this is like, I think it might be longer than War and Peace.
Yeah, and I haven't read War and Peace, so I can't say for sure, but it is a lengthy book. I'd recommend the Kindle version. It's a lot easier to carry around your cell phone than the actual even paperback copy of that. So, but even just kind of going, fortunately, I'm at a good point that I'm starting to have more conversations with my attorney and some other law firms of, asset protection, estate planning, legacy. My biggest thing of, wanting to avoid probate and, really just kind of protecting assets. I think, unfortunately, we've learned with, some politics and some, shall we say, entitled generations out there that, if someone's successful, I need a piece of that. And whether it's from a frivolous lawsuit or excessive taxation or taxing unrealized gains or whatever ridiculous thing a politician is going to come up with, I think the best thing is just to be proactive to protect those assets and shield them as much as you can, and maybe kind of have a bulletproof cover over it so that they aren't subject to as much loss from creditors and predators as I think Tom Wheelwright and Garrett Sutton call them.
This is paramount. So listeners, you need to make sure that this is done correctly with everything that you have. Your asset protection needs to be super high.
Yes.
In case in point, I mentioned that my husband's a residential broker. He's actually opening his own office. So he's now a managing broker, which is super cool.
Oh, wow.
And at first, after 13 years, very successful in his industry, he had a transaction where one of the parties actually died.
Oh, geez.
In the middle, they were supposed to close, and then one of the sellers died. He represented the buyers. Let's just say it threw a complete wrench in the wheel and go through all sorts of probate pieces and if they would have had it set up in a different entity from the beginning, they could have avoided that struggle, which really was. But that's how awesome he is, that he kept it all together. I just can't believe it. Lots of headaches involved, but he managed it well. But that type of information helped. He has some other sellers that unfortunately somebody is, terminally ill. And he said, how are you vesting title over here? How is this?
Right.
And weren't doing it. So now they're on the path to, this is something that is real.
Yeah.
That you speak with your attorneys, with people about, and get things secured correctly.
And I would even say just, network, talk to more people, and find a well-vetted, qualified attorney. I mean, the $49 LLC from LegalZoom isn't going to do the, bit. And unfortunately, and I still wish this myth would go away, but a lot of people think, oh, I have a will. I'm, no. in a good place. It's like a will doesn't avoid probate. Wills can still be torn apart by judges. I mean, you need trust, you need estate plans, you need, continuing of life, and a lot of other subsets on that.
So we've probably whet everybody's palate and their appetite to learn more about this, because it is foundational. It is critical for you. So make sure you go check out John's podcast, because he's already mentioned that he has guests that are speaking on this, and you can get more information when you go to his podcast as well. John, it has been fantastic speaking with you. I'm just excited that we finally got to have this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I just had that squirrel moment, because I want to say something that most people, I think, don't realize. Maybe they do. Maybe I was just, the blonde in the room, but I'm embarrassed to say this. So this is like a huge dose of transparent humility here. My husband and I were talking about the finance system in our country, Federal Reserves and things like that. I did not realize that the Federal Reserve was not part of the government.
And unfortunately, a lot of people, it's like, oh, it says federal, it's got to be part of the federal government. I'm like, well, FedEx used to be Federal Express, but that's not part of the federal government. So,
right. So I wanted to make sure that went out there before we, leave this podcast.
Yeah,
that might be one of those what moments, and I felt embarrassed. I felt like I should know this. How do I not know that or understand it? But there are lots of things I'm still learning. They don't
teach it in school. They're too worried about frog dissection and the Pythagorean theorem to worry about Federal Reserve and investing.
Or to teach you that it's not associated with the government, but it sounds that way. And like, that is so misleading. How can they even still have that as their type? Like, I'm surprised there aren't lawsuits on that one.
Yeah, well, Woodrow Wilson threw us a curveball all those years ago.
Right. So once again, thank you, John, for coming on The Conscious Investor. It's been pure joy. Great conversation. I think you and I could talk forever on this.
Probably.
Would you go ahead and, give everybody the best place that they can reach out and contact you, and just one more reminder as to your podcast, and we'll of course put links in the show notes.
Sure. So all my materials you can find on wealthandfreedomnexus.com. If you're driving and that seems like a mouthful, you can just actually type in rickgarn.com, and that'll redirect you to my website as well. Interesting tidbit, there are only 3 Rickgarns in the world, so I'm not too difficult to find if you search John Rickgarn on Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram or any of the social media platforms I'm on.
That's wild. That's a whole nother conversation. I'm not going to bite on the bait right there.
No worries.
Awesome. Thanks again, John, for coming on this show. To all my awesome listeners, make sure you go connect up, listen to his podcast. And until next time, live big, love bigger. What's the big deal about investing in apartments? Why is it better than investing in a slew of single-family homes? I've compiled a lot of information on why investing in a multifamily, also known as apartments, will help you reach your investment goals. Head over to 3keysinvestments.com and download the Why Invest in Multifamily guide today.